I had an amazing chat with Alexandra Annabelle the other day. She is the lead PR for a technology refugee organization called TechFugees. In fact, that description isn't probably quite right because they basically try to link up technology firms with humanitarian crisis to try and help out the people who have been displaced by that crisis. The organization was actually set up by one of the key technology journalists in the UK, a guy called Mike Butcher, who is perhaps described as the journalist who everyone wants to get in front of in the tech space, particularly in the United Kingdom. And he wanted to use his contacts with people like Snapchat, Facebook, Google, and all these other ones, many others, to do good, basically, in the world. But while charities may not attract the same level of criticism as companies, they do face another issue, and that is disaster fatigue. The story of human suffering continues, as we know, and as we also all know, whether you like it or not, when a story seems to be the same and it keeps getting repeated, people get bored of it, and in turn, journalists get bored of it, whatever the merits or the morals behind the story. So how do you get it in the press? How do you get journalists to pay attention to a story that everyone seems to be just getting tired of? Alexandra has a heck of a lot of experience on her side, and the bit I'm going to be releasing of the chat that I had with her is where we focus on this particular bit. You know, how do you get over that story fatigue? We also talk about the role of PR and how it's changing as well. And I think that is absolutely fascinating, some of her thoughts on this. And why perhaps you should not think of PR anymore as just press relations or even working with content creators, but as a much bigger thing. I'll talk about that a bit more after the bit I play. I thought I'd start, though, with a bit where we were talking about how hard it can be to reach new journalist contacts these days, because she had a few thoughts on that, which I 100% agree with as well, what she says. Don't forget, all the show notes will be in the next newsletter at thepublicrelationspodcast.com. Thepublicrelationspodcast.com. Just click on the subscribe button there or the newsletter link. Have a look up there. You will get all those details. So it's all going to be in there. So for now, just sit back and enjoy, as there's a lot of good stuff in this chat.
It's really hard at the moment, but I think, again, it's the relationship piece. I think these days people don't pick up the phone. But one thing I'm doing with a team where I'm consulting at the moment is do some research, like basic research. What are these people writing about? Actually, if they've got like a personal interest. So, for instance, working on we were working with a Tron producer, Donald Kushner, on something on his NFT Cryptosaurs film. And I found someone at Wired who was so mad, such a mad fan, Tron fan, that he created his own Wired cover of Tron. And I contacted him, and then we got the interview because actually it played into his personal interest, but also his beat at Wired. I think there's still kind of a lack of people doing like just basic research on stuff. And I think journalists know. I know also, like, for instance, we struggle at the moment with the other agency I work at because we do a lot of Web3 metaverse stuff. And a lot of journalists are like, if I get another press release around that, I'm going to stab my eyes out. I think it's just a case of knowing what they're interested in, giving them something that no one else will have, and actually having a real understanding of what's going to make a good story for them. And I think that's the key.
The thing with refugees and with disasters is that you've got two things. One, which is the kind of stigma against refugees. Okay. And the second one is that you get this disaster fatigue. So you're getting a public which are kind of going either that, well, that kind of thing happens in these other countries, or they're just, it's like any story that's constantly in the media, people tire of it. They get fatigued with it. So how do you break through that?
Difficulty is that fatigue. And also, I think it's the negative connotations around refugees. We're constantly being bombarded with people coming over in boats. And actually, we did a piece of research back in at the end of 2021, actually, where we talked about British people's attitudes towards refugees and actually how we can train them. And actually, a lot of them want them to be able to come and be useful members of society. I think what we're trying to really do is tell those human stories. So we have a real community of people where we talk as a collective around those human stories and trying to show people in a different light.
So is this people who are doing their own social media and putting stories out? Or how does this work? How do you actually get that message across?
We kind of talk about in terms of chapters around the world. And we are a voluntary-based organisation. So we have very active chapters, say, for instance, Lebanon and Beirut, in Australia. We engage those chapters if we want to talk about any particular projects or any kind of fundraising initiatives. We have partners in terms of some of the technology partners that we work with that have created tech and have put it somewhere where it's worked really well. So we try and use those case study-led things.
But how do they actually apply this? How do they get that message out? Is what I'm trying to understand.
I think, well, at the moment, what we're trying to do is just pitch those into main publications as interviews, and just we're trying to storyfy tech refugees at the moment.
Yes.
So we've got a whole new team now. So we're trying to storyfy, get those stories, do some social content, also do some media content as well. We're doing something like International Women's Day and Women's Month, actually, where we're talking about strong Ukrainian women as part of our collective and community. So we're doing a social media campaign around that, and then also pitching that into some of the more kind of like women's consumer publications.
And what do you do, though, to make those case studies stand out? Because, and I'm guessing here, but the journalist perspective, if they're hearing it, they're kind of going, oh, another refugee story. So how do you give that edge to make it stand out so that they go, gosh, I've got to use this?
So we've got some really good cases. We have a lady, Angelica, who is a Syrian and Ukrainian refugee, and she's working with MIT and Harvard Business School on disinformation projects. So we've got real statistical data as well, and projects and research on that.
Yeah,
so
very topical, and yeah.
So there's a couple of things at the moment as well. So we've decided to align ourselves very much on the human trafficking side of things at the moment, and then with the disinformation, because disinformation spreads like a virus. So you have all the fake news, you've got all the kind of the conspiracy theory stuff. And actually that doesn't help matters either in terms of that fatigue around.
But it's very topical though, isn't it? It's something that journalists want to talk about. So yeah.
So we're doing a research project on that. We're doing a number of partnerships, which we're going to announce later on with some kind of more bigger organizations. But at the moment, one of the key things I'm working on right at this moment in time is around the human trafficking angle. And it's been quite interesting because, from the second day after the quake, there were babies already being trafficked for.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
People were selling their organs. And we're actually supporting Stop the Traffic at the moment. They are actually working on a campaign that's aimed at vulnerable children. So they're working with Meta and TikTok, using language that would be used by traffickers. So what we're finding at the moment, particularly around human trafficking, and this is what's really disheartening, is where technology plays a role. They are using social platforms such as Snapchat, TikTok, Meta to create false job ads, to create false safe passage for people. So we're working with the organizations around that.
So what are you doing? You were mentioning that you're involved in a campaign with that. I'm interested. What are you doing with that at the moment yourself?
So I'm supporting them on that. So that's, I actually even introduced them to contacts I had at Snapchat. So wherever we have contacts that they might not have, we engage them. We're very collaborative in that sense. Last week, I had a call with 5 of the counter-trafficking agencies because we have a very well-known filmmaker interested in making a documentary. So we're at the moment looking at various different treatments for that to hopefully get commissioned.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So here, often people kind of go, oh, PR is about reaching out to communicators or to journalists or to content creators. And what you're saying here is actually PR is about working with any organization really that can influence the message and the direction this goes. So PR is actually, it's not just journalists, it's reaching out to your contact at Snapchat and saying, well, how can we influence what's happening on that platform?
Yeah, because I think we work better together. And the whole point of us, a point we'll do at Tech Refugees is we're a collaborative organization. So we work best collaboratively with our tech community, but also with our chapters, with everyone else. So what was really refreshing actually on this call last week with the human trafficking agencies wasn't like each of them saying, I just want to do my own campaign. It was 5 counter-trafficking agencies coming together and saying, how can we all work together to combat this? And how can we all collaborate together and get the message out there and tell the story? And actually, there's a lot of things that people don't know what's going on, and we're using various different streams. So I think traditional PR has always been, let's talk to a journalist, let's do content. But I think actually it's building those relationships to tell a stronger story with different organizations. And I think that's what also makes it a stronger story for journalists in the end, because I can go to someone and go, well, you're bound to say that. But actually, if I say, well, I can connect you to the country lead of A21, the counter-trafficking agency, or, the Anti-Slavery Collective, which is founded by Princess Eugenie, or, Stop the Traffic, we've got all these people, and we can tell these stories, and we can give you completely different angles. That makes it a much stronger story, and people want to get involved in that. And I think that's always been the case in anything I've done. It's kind of data is always a really good thing, but also just the collaborative thing. And I think sometimes we get so involved in what we do ourselves or trying to push our own product, not seeing the value of actually working together, really like the value of that.
That's interesting. Give me an idea about that meeting then. So you've got 5 different organizations, and certainly my experience of charities in the past, and they often do like to go on their own direction. It's like, we know our structure, we know the people we work with, and we're not talking to anyone else. So how did you go about facilitating your part of that, of bringing these people together and having that one conversation?
Well, we already had a lot of them speak at our event in October. So we had a TechFugees Global Summit, and we had one.
So you got to know them there personally?
Yeah, I got to know them personally, but I think we tend to do that anyway at TechFugees, where we have a real kind of ethos in who we work with as well. So we have these Drench values, and everyone we work with has to kind of have similar mission and values and goals to us, and it's common purpose. And actually there was someone we were doing some fundraising with who it became very obvious that it was about the individual, not about the collaborative effort. And so we all kind of moved away from that because we all wanted to collaborate together. And all of us as organizations agreed to do that, which is, again, I think it's a really strong point. And I don't think you're going to get that everywhere. But I think when it comes to big issues like those humanitarian issues like Ukraine and Turkey, I think it's more a case of it's a massive job and you're not going to get very far on your own. And I think each of those organizations brings a very different element and adds different values. So we're all very complementary.
As I said before I started playing this, all the show notes are going to be in the newsletter next week. Just go to thepublicrelationspodcast.com, thepublicrelationspodcast.com, and click the subscribe button to join on the newsletter there. Get your name on the newsletter, and I will get that out to you. I was really interested in this point that Alexandra made about PR being much more than journalism or talking to content creators now. It's about changing the whole mindset of people. It's about changing that whole conversation, not just through press. It's this public relations. Everyone used to say press officer, but it's like it is so much more than that now. And I think in this new era, we've got to be looking at it as a far bigger role because, frankly, every PR person I've met can do a heck of a lot more than just talk to journalists. I'm sure you agree with me. In many ways, we're not just talking about PR anymore. We are talking about an element of lobbying. You're lobbying journalists, you're lobbying content creators, you're lobbying anyone to try and take on board the message that you're trying to put across. So it's not just about putting out statements about your sector, but about fighting for your sector. As PR changes, as you have the advent of AI, and as we move into this new era, to stand out in the office, it's skills like this which I think are going to help to actually define you and allow you to be that PR who is the one that everyone wants to be working with. I was thinking actually after I chatted to Alexandra about what I would lobby for. And in fact, a listener asked me the other day about this and whether he should start to actually represent his organization more than just putting out comments. And as I said, I do think there are going to be some really good opportunities for this. And there are good opportunities to be spokespeople, but there are some downsides to it as well. And I remember a good few years ago, actually, before I became a journalist and a news editor in PR myself, I found myself writing to organizations about an issue that I was passionate about. I just started doing it. You can hear the parallels here with Alexandra. And I even got invited to join a lobbying group on that issue at the time. And this was years ago when PR still was press officer. But maybe that is the way now that we need to be thinking. That PRs are no longer just that one role. We're now about changing the whole message, whether that means doing something publicly by getting column inches, or whether it means doing something by bringing people together, bashing heads together, and making things change. So much great stuff from Alexandra. There's more from that chat I had with her, actually, that I'm going to release over the coming weeks as well. There's so much more to do in the Public Relations podcast. I am sorry about the delay last week. I just couldn't believe it. I got COVID 2.0. There we go. That sounds techie in itself, doesn't it? I got COVID and I moved cities, as you heard about as well. I'm now in Sydney, Australia. So if you're around here, I would love to meet up for a chat as well. Right, that's enough of holding up your time, and I've got other stuff to do. Must get on. Have an awesome week, and I'll speak to you very soon.